Hey guys, I'm Andy and I'm back with another video on proteins, more specifically amino acids. This is basically me dusting off the cobwebs from a project that I did back in my undergrad years where I had to give a presentation on amino acids, what it means to the body and the way how it reacts as a pharmacodynamic. But here we're going to take those same applications and apply that towards exercise, the structural anatomy, and hopefully to give you a little more insight on what proteins are really meant for. All right, so here's my disclaimer. Again, I'm an exercise physiologist. This is basically the art and science of combining a whole bunch of different fundamentals and concepts to elaborate or elucidate on a formal physiological goal. So if your goal is to become healthier or to wean yourself off medications or in anything in those realms, that's where what I do should not supersede that of a medical practitioner or a physician. In short, basically anything that comes out of these videos or any type of recommendations that you may perceive that comes out of my context should be discussed with your physician or primary care so that you don't have any contentious reactions as far as does this exercise and this medication, that some of those don't work hand in hand, i.e. muscle relaxers and then going to do a 4K. That's not the best idea. So take this with a grain of salt. Hope you enjoy the video still, and got any questions, do contact me. My contact information will be at the end of the video, and hope to give you more perspective. All right, so what are BCAAs? And I want to turn my head towards my screens here. Basically, they're the components of a complete protein. BCAAs are known as branched-chain amino acids, and you can see that the combination here, leucine, isoleucine, and valine, that's the formal combination of what BCAA typically stands for. It can be found in supplements, as my initial slide showed you. It can be done, you can receive those in pill form, you can receive those in powder form, but you can also receive those out of foods. I know there's a huge push for a lot of people appreciating whole foods and eating getting their essentials out of foods, but there are situations where chemical-based proteins such as protein powders do play a huge role as far as digestion and the intake of those nutrients. Here you can see that the formal or the most common fractional synthetic rate, which would be a 2-to-1 ratio, assuming that leucine is going to give you more out of the other two components, and I'll show you a slide later that has to do with why that is. But why? Like the most abundant amino acids in the muscle, which together account for 20% of the total amino acids. Now you got to think, these are still considered essential amino acids, and I'll show you a slide on that next, but glutamine is another amino acid that makes up close to 60% of your muscle tissue too. It's not considered a essential amino acid. It's what you consider a conditionally essential amino acid. Essentially, why BCAAs are important to study is because protein cannot be carried by the blood. It's basically a protein breaks down, it goes through your GI system, and it gets reabsorbed in the small intestine to repair, rebuild, or to build proteins. And we'll talk more about that once we get into the nitty-gritty of this. Okay, so here on this slide, we're going to talk about the essential amino acids. It takes 9 essential amino acids to comprise a complete protein. So when you think of a protein, this is essentially what you're trying to consume. Any balance or any ratio of these 9 amino acids is going to cause you to have a protein. Is a calorically inducing or energy containing, should I say, macronutrient that feeds our body energy. So all 9 of these amino acids have to be in a protein to make it a calorically based protein. So we mean here by essential amino acids kind of leads into what we know as a high quality protein. High quality versus low quality, right? And everybody will have their opinion on it, and I'm glad that you do. That means you have a sentient brain. But as far as like the textbook, or if you're to read literature based on what a high quality versus a low quality protein is, it's going to have a combination of each of these with a higher concentration of this bad boy right here. As we saw in the previous slide, that the fractional ratio has to do with more leucine. And leucine is the primary building block of the muscles. It's also the one that primarily activates the insulin release from our body to start building tissue, okay? So leucine has to be a higher concentration. Where you don't get a lot of leucine happens to come from your vegetable proteins are always going to be really, really light in leucine, which doesn't mean that they're a bad source of protein by any means. No, that just means that you have to find different sources vegetables to bring in, or different sources of protein that will include or increase that amount of leucine. So let's keep that in mind. Right here, again, we're talking about glutamine. This is what it looks like. This is the amine chain, and this is the side chain here. Essentially what glutamine does is it's, again, one of the main proponents to muscle tissue, and it's the primary constituent that helps absorb a lot of these other nutrients into the muscle tissue, i.e. glucose. Glutamine, GLU, glucose, sugar, GLU. Think of those correlative prefixes there. Straight to the point, right? Are BCAAs banned by the professional sports? No. Okay. When is it optimal for BCAA consumption? And, as a general guideline, you can think of it as it could be taken before, during, or after exercise, even throughout the day on days that you're not exercising, or if you're doing a high-intensity intermittent training. You can have more amino acids throughout the day because of the oxidative stress on the muscle tissue requires you to repair and rebuild that faster. Does that mean you need to suck down a lot of proteins? Probably not, but at the same time with BCAAs, they do come with that main mixture, the leucine, isoleucine, valine combination that's going to help start synthesizing those muscles. Right, so it increases muscle protein synthesis, or the art of building muscle, if you remember seeing that from an older video. But what are the major side effects, right? There are a couple of side effects to having abundant aminos in your system. And some of those have to do with like old school Atkins diet. Now it's transitioned a lot over the last 30 years, and they've been able to apply a lot more foundational science behind it. So this isn't, again, a slam on what's bad out there, or a praise on what's good out there, but it's just the perception of it. So high protein diets, that's basically taking out your carbohydrates, taking out your fats. Again, on one of my other videos, I mentioned that you need to have a combination of carbohydrates and fats to help build these glycoproteins or these lipoproteins that help build healthy cells, help build healthy tissues. Women who cut out fats from their diet tend to have really thin hair. They will have really dry skin. They will start increasing problems with things like endometriosis or abnormal tissue growth in certain areas. That is going to complicate life. But then when we talk about fatigue, and just quickly summarize it, basically a lot of leucine can trigger tryptophan. Tryptophan can trigger serotonin, and serotonin can trigger fatigue. And we'll talk more about that. But loss of coordination, that tends to relate back into the tiredness and fatigue and the peripheral fatigue scenarios. But again, trying to paint this with a little bit of a broad brush, but at the same time to let you know that there are some complications with high protein diets. All right, so just like my medical disclaimer said, when is it important to consult your physician? Okay, and here's a couple of keynotes. There are a few others, and we'll tackle one of them in a moment. But if you have any kind of liver or kidney disease, which has to do with a lot of the way how your body excretes urea, nitrogen, basically the rebuilding of a lot of like your proteins and your enzymes, it'd probably be a good idea to have a panel checked out by your physician. Okay, but besides that, this is pretty much the caveat to the disclaimer. Muscle protein synthesis. Okay, you've probably heard me talk about this once or twice in previous videos, but here's a more of a breakdown or a more well-defining slide on it. Muscle protein synthesis is basically a hormonal augmentation lasting up to 48 hours after resistance training. So if you remember seeing my presentation on exercise and nutrition being 30% each, this is why both of those together can make up to 60%, okay? So hormonal augmentation lasting up to 48 hours. Intake of proteins or amino acids during this time is extremely beneficial because, like I was saying earlier, leucine, isoleucine, and valine. Leucine is great, but it's not bioactive unless valine and isoleucine are with it. So you can, spoon feed yourself leucine as much as you want to hit the trigger, but it's not going to make a benefit to you until you tackle it with those other amino acids. But here, leucine specifically has the anaerobic effect on, or the anabolic effect on proteins. So again, leucine causes insulin to respond to elicit mTOR complexes through exercise. Those two synergistically come together, making IGF-1, which then goes through the whole differentiation stage of creating IGF-2, making more nuclei, making more muscle, but making your muscle larger so you can have more than one nuclei in one muscle fiber. So it's pretty cool. Amplifies the ratio or the rate of protein synthesis too. That's why leucine is very important. So muscle protein synthesis. I hope you got a little bit more out of it. Okay, so here's a good series of charts that I pulled from reference 3, and I'll show you on my reference slide. But when we talk about the amino acids by themselves versus when they're together, here's the response rate of amino acid intake. So you can see on each of these, you're going to have a placebo effect, you're going to have a leucine by itself effect, the branched chain amino acid effect, then we're going to talk about those amino acids again, those essential amino acids. That means you've got a whole protein concentration going on. And so this has to do with the PCG1 alpha response. We'll talk more about that in a moment. So the alterations in plasma levels of amino acids during and after resistance exercise, the values presented mean a standard error for at least 8 subjects. The ANOVA revealed a main effect of the individual, and I'm reading my notes here so we're all on the same page, basically revealed the main effect time or of time as well as an interaction, so time by supplementation for the individual amino acids. Okay, this was a P equals less than 0.05 kind of situation here. So when you look at it by itself, let's just kind of divulge into placebo versus leucine by itself. Plasma level of leucine goes up, exercise continues to go up, and we've reached about, and this is time in minutes. Okay, so 20 minutes, 40 minutes, this little hash right here is cessation of exercise. And because we're talking about PCG1 alpha, we're talking about aerobic exercise just for FYI purposes. As you can see that the intake of leucine continues to trend upward until about, 50 minutes? So it's 10, 20, 30 minutes after workout, it trends up exponentially to this critical point here. So we want to focus on that when we discuss the best bioavailability times, or what some people may refer to as the anabolic window. So this is exactly the moment that you want to have it. So everybody used to say, oh, after exercise, I need to have it within 30 minutes. As this chart shows you, no, that's Jerry Springer. That is a lie. So we got 50 minutes here, 60, 70, 80 minutes. Would be this great point right here. But if we go on further and starve our bodies a little bit more, that means that the grab quota is going to be much higher. Right, so same thing here with isoleucine by itself. Nothing happening. What color is leucine? Leucine trends downward. See that? But over here we can see that the EAAs and the branched chain amino acids do continue to trend upward. Why? Because leucine now has isoleucine and valine. So let's look at valine. Valine, leucine, valine, leucine. Valine's higher than leucine. Valine is still higher than leucine. And at the end, valine wins. But we bind those three. Look at the differential here. See that? Branch, like the BCAAs by themselves can help increase recovery faster than absorbing those calories of protein by themselves. So let's look at the BCAA-EAA ratio here. EAAs or BCAAs right here is these lighter blocks. You see that? Again, 80 minutes or 30 minutes after workout. We go up here, you can see the crossover. So at this point, this is where proteins themselves, where you want to have that meal, are more beneficial than just a simple amino acid supplement. However, that BCAA supplement is still pretty effective, especially if you're trying to consider weight loss versus weight gain. This is where a great idea for using amino acid supplementation, the BCAAs, to eliminate some excessive protein calories to allow that metabolic deficit. So keep that in mind as you think about what kind of proteins you want to eat. Okay, everyone, we're just going to bring this one to a close for right now. I'm going to section this one off as part 1 of proteins and aminos. And I'll have another one probably next week that has to do with proteins and aminos again. But nonetheless, if you like the content, feel free to hit like, subscribe. It's probably part of my YouTube channel as well as my, figuring out what Instagram has to offer. But I also have a Patreon site, so if you really want to show your appreciation, log on over to my Patreon site and commit to a pledge. That would be awesome. If I had, a penny from every American, I would be able to hire people to help me do productions, and I could do a lot more research in a lot shorter period of time. So appreciate it. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon.